And hello! It's not quite an Ouchies bat rep, but today we are going to go over the black art that is terrain making. We're going to go over 2 by 4 foot board sections in 15mm, and I sure hope you'll enjoy it because it sure confuses the mess out of some people, but it's really not that hard. If you know how to flock and base a miniature, there's just a little bit of a difference to the sciences to make your own terrain, and you can do anything you want with it. You can make desert boards, which are really easy, or you can make Normandy boards, which I have a couple of, or you can make snowboards, which I suspect is going to be somewhere between being like a desert board and being like a Normandy board. It's dense in terrain, but it's mostly one color, so you shouldn't have to worry about it. Now, I like 2 foot by 4 foot sections because it gives you the most versatility that you can without having to break up the board in little sections, because you put more boards out there, you're going to start noticing the lines in the wood. With a 2 by 4 foot section, you get 3 boards for every normal game of Flames of War. Now what we usually use, what I like to use, is a board like this. Don't mind this, I've been using it as a painting medium. But this is what it looks like on the other side. See? It is recessed, as you can see. Got wood runners on the sides because this helps it stay real sturdy whenever you have to rub it up against other boards or transport it around. Because the biggest problem I've seen with a lot of boards is that you end up using just foam, a high density foam on the center, but with no kind of protection on the side. It just rubs off. And it starts turning into whatever the color of the foam is, whether it is purple, pink, you know, not ideal colors unless you're playing 40K. And this helps with its longevity. It also helps it keep straight and flush. I've seen some people use duct tape to clear off the sides on their boards, and it works okay. I like it. I've seen some of them like that. Usually they're the full section. They're usually like, you know, 6 foot by 4 or 8 by 4. However the designer wanted to do it, it looks fantastic. But I found that it frays. Wood runner is the only way to go. Now this is pretty easily done. I use pre-cut boards from Home Depot, especially on these. You don't have to get really expensive wood here. You can use the cheapest out there if you really want to, but I prefer something that has flush cuts like this. Now you don't have to get really fancy with the cuts, but you do have to be mindful that, so this is like 1 inch thick, so you gotta, you know, get all the measurements out just right. Learn from me, this is plywood at the back here. I usually use MDF, but for the last couple boards, the last couple terrain projects, I've been using plywood. And what I'd usually do is I'd go to Home Depot and I'd have them cut it out for me. It ends up being cheaper that way, but it's wrong. Every time they cut it, they get it wrong, and it ends up having to, I'm sure you can't see this, but it adds hours worth of work to this that is completely unnecessary. So if at all possible, go to Home Depot or what have you and get the MDF boards in the size you want. And I know they make 2 by 4 foot sections. Just buy it in that and you're done. Or you can have them cut it out and then you can spend hours trying to figure that out. And if you can see here, it's pretty straightforward. You cut the runners out on the sides, and one time we are going to go through that. And then you cut it out, and then you just drill it in, like any kind of a carpentry project. And of course we also use some liquid nails in there to shore it all up. This is just a demo board. I will be using this one for an expansion foam project in the future, but I'm waiting to see how some of the experiments work out. But it's looking hopeful right now. But until then, we're going to use the traditional method. Insulation foam. Now this is some high density stuff. There's purple, Pink Panther guy on there. Cool stuff, right? And you just cut it out. Now you can use a turkey carver, steak knife, hot foam wire. You can use all kinds of things to do it. It's pretty easy to cut. That's why we like using it. And it's kind of durable. And it just slides right on in. It's kind of like a cake, eh? And then you just trim it all out and make your terrain or do whatever you want with it. Now what we're going to be working on with these boards is some boards that are sent to me by a friend, Yank Yeager. I actually helped him set up these boards and get working on it, but things happened. I couldn't quite devote the amount of time that I needed to, and I ended up not helping him out as much. So we worked out a deal, and I'm going to finish out the rest of the boards for him, and you guys are going to see what exactly goes in the process. Now, what you see over here, this is just spackle. It's just little pink stuff that you buy at the Home Depot. Now you can place it all over the board. It's just there for texture. We're going to actually reinforce it later on with some glue because that's what's absolutely necessary in making this a viable play surface. And it's one of the big differences between this and, say, flocking a miniature, because you need this to be durable. So glue is the way you do it. It's going to be copious amounts of Elmer's glue with a little bit of sand thrown in just for consistency's sake. Now what you see over here with the icy river section, this is, I think, skylighting material. It works. I would use acrylic personally, but we can definitely make this work. In the case of acrylic, you just cut it out the shape that you wanted and place it down on the board. As you can see, we changed the color of it so it looks all muddy and dark. We're going to add a little bit more color onto this in the next segment, and we're going to start applying just a little bit of glue. These little hills are actually, notice the changing color of that one over there. It's actually foam board, insulation foam actually. You can see we created some ruts where the snow would be pushed aside by the road. And all these little hill embankments and whatnot are held on with liquid nails. They're just cut up from the remains, shaved, kind of sanded down a little to look like what they're supposed to, and then put it on the board. Now it's important to try to draw these things out before you start working on them. That's what we did with these, but it's not that apparent now because we're a little later in the process. But don't worry guys, we'll do one from the beginning. You can get away with a lot, you know. This is just a really cheap brush. I think I paid $1 for it. I've used it for 3-4 years now. Just take care of your brushes. Now we want some color variation in here because right now it's all really dark and brown. Now it's going to lighten up where the mud is. Oh, that's too much. And you'd normally be making your Fords. So just like that. Happy accidents. And then you just kind of dot it around. Now it's important to have, and I don't have one right next to me, but it's always good to take a look at your photo references. So you'll often notice something you might be doing wrong, or whether or not you're getting the right color. You know, the mud will track up into the roadways just a little, just like that. It's important to put a little bit of variation in here because otherwise you're going to get the brush and it's just going to look flat. Man, that ain't right. So take care of my brushes, right? And look what I'm doing. I'm just... Ugh. I'm telling you, it pays not to buy expensive brushes. Especially for me. I've used a mess out of them. Remember how I said photo references? Well, when it comes to ice and embankments, the darker colors are always going to be in the center of the river. Some extra paint. We're going to start muddying up the tracks. Throw a little extra color out there. This is by no means the end all. As a matter of fact, we'll probably encase this thing in some glue later on. Now the colors I'm using is Americana. You do not have to buy expensive paint for this. As a matter of fact, the only expensive paint you ever have to buy is outdoor exterior paint, which we will get to that later. That adds durability to the board. Happy accidents. I never saw a picture of a road in Russia that was covered in snow and it wasn't full of mud. Oh, that is an ugly road. I do not want to be caught out on that. Alrighty. There we go. Voila. Magnifique. We are done. This is ready to be played on. I think we need some blue. There? No, I do not. I thought I had blue. I don't have blue. That makes me sad. Very sad. Let's see how that looks. That looks pretty foreboding. Is there anything I can add to it? I don't think so. It's wet. Imagine that. Okay. Now, Elmer's glue. You can find this actually most hardware stores. Imagine that. In this case, we want it to go on thick, just like that. Now you can do in situ mixing. This is called wet paletting if you're using paints, but we're not, so. And just like that. We got varying consistencies. This is supposed to be icy death. Look at that consistency. It's all milky, it's kind of, yeah. So now you just kind of drag it on down, just like that. Drag it on down. Okay. Mind you, I've never actually quite done it like this. That's the beauty of this. You get to experiment. And if it doesn't, I get to build a new board. That's okay. We'll make it work. Okay. There's it. Now when this dries, it should turn clear. At least I hope it does. Quite embarrassing if it doesn't. If it doesn't, well, it turns white. That's my fallback. Kind of cold. Take that, global warming. I have a colleague that swears up and down that global warming is not real. It's hilarious how much he wants to deny it. I think that's good. Got a little bit of rough edges on the side. It should look like it's about to freeze. Or it's not as frozen as everything else. And there we go. We're going to let that dry overnight and then we'll come back to it because patience is a virtue with these kinds of things. So just let it dry and then we'll work on it at a later date. See you then.